had a conversation in the Salt Lake City Planning Commission in terms of like using the index to think about where we should place affordable housing, right? Because we're thinking about providing opportunity. I did a study at the Metropolitan Research Center at the University of Utah looking at socioeconomic change in Salt Lake City specifically. And I created like a typology, and it looks at change from it. So it's like from 1970 to 2010. And this is the index, and really what I was looking for, it was gentrification. But when you look at socioeconomic change, you can see some areas that might have experienced some decline as well instead of gentrification. So I just going to explain very quickly the methodology. For example, if the percentage in the neighborhood has like higher than average college education, this neighborhood will receive a +1, right? And then if it has like a percentage that is lower, or I should say higher, of like poverty, then it will receive a negative score. So basically, all the neighborhoods in Salt Lake City were compared to the city average for these different decades. To give you an example of like, let's think about the greater avenues. If there's more percentage of people with college education, this is a +1, right? And then if it has below in terms of like families living in poverty, that means that it's also a +1. So neighborhood could receive for +13 to -13 in this scale. So I'm going to go very quickly through these maps, and they show from lower socioeconomic status to like higher socioeconomic status, and it's like a gradient. This report actually could be found online, so there's a link below. So that was 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000, and then 2010. So this part is less important. I'm going to show you the next part, which really looks at the typology of these neighborhoods. And basically, the neighborhoods were classified in looking to no change and some change. In no change, you have neighborhoods that basically stayed being of like higher class or a middle class, neighborhood that stay in poverty, and neighborhoods that stayed in extreme poverty. And then you have the change typology, which has some improvements but not gentrification. And then you have decline, and there's different types of decline. So here are the neighborhood typologies looking at change for from 1970 to 2010. And I'm going to go very quickly through these just typologies. And again, you can find this report online. So these are neighborhoods that stayed as being upper class, and then middle class, in poverty, and in extreme poverty. And then you have the the change, and there's two types of change that came out of this typology. So one is like not gentrified, which is like places that experience some rising in the socioeconomic status. So something I want to point out, because this methodology was conducted in different cities, but to give you an example, I did it in Chicago, and something that I noticed is that places that were not gentrified, the next decade, they were gentrified. And the problem with gentrification is that people are displaced from opportunities. So if we don't plan ahead, thinking of affordable housing and maintaining people in those places, people are displaced from those opportunities. And that's why that is important. So in terms of like also thinking of decrease, and in Chicago, for example, the decrease is actually more common, and in many other cities, than actually gentrification, but it's something that we don't talk too much about. So these are some neighborhoods that again maybe we could think about putting more investment in them. And actually live in Rose Park, so personally, I'm trying to put some investment in that particular neighborhood. So I went very quickly through this, and you can get the report. But the takeaways are that we should look into neighborhoods of opportunity to make sure that they have affordable housing so people can stay there and they are not displaced. We have to look at neighborhoods and maybe where we need to put more investment. Investment is needed, and that includes places that have experienced some decline in the past. But also, if you look at the blues of in these neighborhoods, there's some places that haven't been experiencing poverty for more than 40 years now. So maybe we should be thinking about investments. So all this is like numbers, right? And I am mostly of a qualitative researcher, and I like to think about people and providing opportunity for people. And I'm doing like several studies right now. I'm going to go very quickly through them. I'm working with like YouWorks and just doing like training for young people, mostly in construction. And I was talking to Jacob, and I asked him, "What's your favorite thing about this program?" And he said, "Well, we went to the U and we check out the U." So this is like a question: how we can think about, first of all, people not dropping out of high school, but then moving through like training programs to community college, to university, and maybe not everybody will go to college, but how we can provide a livable wage for everyone. Um, I also work with like immigrant families, and I'm doing a study with University Neighborhood Partners, just thinking about housing stability. And there I met Olga, and Olga actually she was not evicted, but she was like given a notice to vacate from her apartment because people didn't want to pay the rent. Nobody. They had some kind of strike, and it was because the quality of the housing was very poor. She ended up moving to another place that was higher quality of housing, but it's more expensive. So she struggles to being able to stay in her community, and she wants her kids to stay in the same school so they can do better instead of like moving around. So how we think about people like Olga and just giving her opportunities. And finally, this is another study that I'm doing with Assist Incorporated, and um, it is about how we think about accessibility, and they do accessibility modifications, home modifications, and so people can move in their home, but hopefully they can also move outside of the home. If you put a ramp, you're opening the door for people to expand their world, right? Just get to their sidewalk, to the neighborhood. And doing that project, I met Julie here, and Sis actually helped her to put all these like bar grabs or hand grabs, yeah, bar grabs, yes. Um, and I know at some point I will forget English, so there you go. So now she can move outside in her yard, and actually she likes walking in her neighborhood. Every day she goes for a walk. So how we can provide people for those kinds of opportunities, and so they have like a healthy aging. Maybe that is a park next to where they live, and just like amenities. So at the end of the day, access to opportunities is about investing in people, and it is about young people and older adults. It is about families and children. It is about immigrants, but it's opportunity for all. And so because really this is like the key to the prosperity of the region. And I will say for all, it doesn't have to be a homogeneous all, right? But it has to be opportunity for all and investments in people. So next we are going to have like Reed Ewing, and Dr. Reed Ewing is a professor and Philadelphia Metropolitan Planning, and he actually will be talking more specifically about what is the relationship between urban sprawl and urban mobility.